Awesome. Welcome everyone to Wednesday workshop. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A. Otherwise, I'm going to go over just some of our typical support stuff in the beginning, and then we'll hop right in. So as usual, if you guys are looking for more webinars like the one that we have today or the one that we're on right now, head over to our website and go to the Learn tab and then click on Webinars. Here you're going to see that we covered settings and integrations this morning, and then we are now on Wednesday workshop. Next week, we're going to be going over intake forms and property templates. And then next Wednesday, we're going to be going over using Open to Close 101. If you guys are interested in signing up for these, you can just click on that register button. It's going to take you to the register page, have you pop in some information and say register. Other than that, if you guys are looking for just like, chat support, we've got our little chat icon. You can chat with us from our website, or when you're logged in, you can also chat with us when you're logged in. I usually suggest chat with us when you're logged in. That way we can see which, email you're using for your account in case you need us to troubleshoot or assist in any way with updating or fixing anything in your guys' account. The other ways to reach out to us is through support at Open to Close or help at Open to Close if you guys need to email us in. You can also locate our help guides or our support center by clicking on help guides here underneath that Learn tab. And then within your guys' system, head over to that little person icon and click on support center. It's going to take you to the same place. From there, you can search up honestly anything. You can search up our previous Wednesday workshops if you need to. So I can just type in Wednesday and here we'll see all of the Wednesday workshops. Usually I suggest get pretty particular with the date if you're looking for a particular date and time. Awesome. Well, we don't have any questions just yet. Definitely feel free to drop them into the Q&A if you guys have anything that's been coming up. Also feel free to share some of your guys' wins or some of the areas that you guys have felt like, hey, I figured out how to do this and it's working really well for me, because we always like to share that kind of information with other people too, because your information, the way that you do your process might be similar to someone else and it might make someone else's process that much easier. Other than that, I'm just going to go over some of the frequent asked questions from this past week. And then if we get any Q&As, we will transition to that. So number one, the first one that looks like we heard from this last week, as far as for Q&As, was property table filters, how to filter to show certain types of transactions. So when we're talking about property table filters, we're talking about going to this little house icon here. We can also expand this view by selecting our three lines and click on properties. I'm going to go ahead and collapse this view because while we're using the front end, we don't really need to have that open. We can just hover over it and we can see that it says properties. Once we're on this page here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on where it says all transactions. Now, if you guys are brand new users, you've never created this before. I'm sorry, give me one moment. Okay, so if you guys are brand new users, you've never created a table before, this might be blank for you. I'm going to go ahead and kind of show you what that looks like. I found a quick trick to get it to pop up. I'm just going to put in some random verbiage here. It's going to create that table for me, and then I'm going to delete it. So if your screen looks a little something like this, what you're going to want to do is click on property tables and either select one from the list or select create new table. It might prompt you to create a new table if you're a brand new user. You can also click on create new property table here as well, and that'll have you create that table. But once that table's been created, I'm going to go ahead and just go to all transactions. The next step that you're going to want to do, I'm going to go ahead and clear out this user seat. Here we go. The next thing you're going to want to do is update some of the filters. So it kind of depends. Some people like to have it where they have all transactions. They're seeing them regardless, whether they're open, closed, pending, listing, active listing, whether it's a buyer, seller, regardless of who it's assigned to. That might be the table view that you need. If you need to edit that view, you're just going to want to select underneath whatever filter you need to select. So contract client type, I can select edit. I can select, I just want to see my buyers, select close. And now it's filtered that list down to only the 7 properties with buyers. I can click on clear all to get back to my 14 properties. For contract status, I can select on edit and I can say, I just want to see what's pending or under contract. Once I've selected those options, I'm going to go ahead and say close. It's going to update that view. And now we only see the 5 properties that either have the file status as under contract or pending. Any questions on setting up those? I know that that was like one of the frequent asked questions, so you guys might not have any follow-up. Cool. So usually what I suggest for this tables and segments area is I usually suggest like have one that's all transactions, you know, regardless of filters. That can be your main one. That way you can see how many properties you currently have in your account. And then underneath the segments, that's usually where I say, let's get a little bit more focused on our views, right? So here we can see we've got an active listing. I would want to update that contract client type to buyer or seller, maybe dual, and then see only my sellers. And then I'd want to select contract status. And I'd want to say, okay, well, let me just see everything that's, you know, listing agreement, pre-marketing, listing coming, listing active. Maybe active listing here, you know, just grabbing anything that has anything to do with listing and saying close. Here now we see all the ones that have those specific listing parameters. On my next one, buyers under contract, I'd want to update that contract client type to the buyer, possibly dual as well. And then I'd want to see specifically, I just want to see what's pending and under contract. Let me go ahead and say close. Now we only have those 3 properties. Going down, we have closing soon. Maybe I want to create some more specific filters. So for example, this one, what I have it as is I have it saying this date range. So this month. I haven't updated this filter. The great thing about open to close is that when you do select one of these options, what it's going to do is when it goes to that new month, so just like how we just left October and now we're in November, it's going to automatically update that date range for us. So I'm just going to be worried about what's closing this month. I can also update it to say this week, next month, the next 7 days, last 7 days, whatever I need to, or I can say clear and I can set a custom date range if I need to. Maybe I just want to see from November 1st. Let me just go ahead and click on that from, let's say November 1st through the 31st of December, just the last 2 months of the year. I can say apply, and now it's going to go based off of a custom range versus a range that I entered in. I'm going to go ahead and say clear. We'll go ahead and say this month, and we'll have it just set to this month. Here for the date filter, once we've selected our date range, we're going to want to select our date filter as well. So because this one says closing, let's go ahead and go with the closing date. So now it's showing me any properties that are in that closing date range. Now, as far as for what's showing up here in these table column headers, I've been pretty lucky that most of the time, you know, I click on my active listing, I can see my file status here, contract client type. I click on my closing and I see my closing date up here at the top, right? Not all the time when you're creating these filters is this closing date going to be here up at the top. To update that, to have that there, we're going to want to click on table columns, and we're just going to want to make sure that that's been selected here. So you can see here, this is where all my current columns are. I can select any other date that I need to by selecting, you know, transaction details, listing details, commission details, intake questions. I can also select contacts if I want to. So let's say, you know I'm focusing on my closing, but maybe I need to grab on a specific person on here. Or when I'm looking at my, let's go ahead and say leases, maybe I want a table column on here that says, you know, tenant, or maybe I want the landlord to be at the top, right? So it just kind of depends on what you need. Definitely feel free to play around with it. Add in, you know, the different ways that you might want to filter out your property view. Just keep in mind that if you don't select, you know, a contract status or a client type, if it's set to no filter set, it's going to show you all of those properties regardless of what they are. Okay. Cool. Once again, just doing a check. Are there any questions that you guys might have instead of the FAQs that I'm going to run through? Okay. All right. I'll keep going down the list. Next one. Cool. So FUB widget shows the need to log into OTC. They need to assign FUB roles. Okay, awesome. So looks like we're having questions about how that FUB integration works. So I'll just quickly do a rundown from beginning to end about FUB. Going over to our gear icon, we're going to click on apps and API. We're just going to want to make sure that our follow-up boss API key has been added here. That follow-up boss API key that you're going to add in here should be your admin account, right? The one that's going to be the one that you log into. If we're talking about allowing our agents to log into Follow-Up Boss, we're going to want that agent to log into their own personal Follow-Up Boss account. They're going to want to go into their agent portal. So I'm just going to impersonate Justin here. Once they've logged into their agent portal, they're going to want to go down to their little API keys, and they're going to want to share their credentials with you here. Having them share their credentials with you guys here, their Follow-Up Boss credentials, will make it that when you're looking at that property, you can say, I want to sync to this particular person's Follow-Up Boss account. Okay. So first, make sure that their credentials in here. Once we know that their credentials are in there, we're going to head over to a property. I'm going to go ahead and go to Ivy Lane. We're going to go to More tab, and then we're going to go to Follow-Up Boss. That's where we can access those APIs. Once we're on there, if Justin had an API that was connected underneath his profile, we would not only see community team, but we would also see Justin Hoxie. So he would be underneath here as well. You'd be able to select him, add on what you need to add on. The question though that we're having right now is specifically about how do we get that, widget to show up for our agent, right? How do we get it to sync over? We're not seeing that populate in Follow-Up Boss. Well, we're going to want to head down to that widget. We're going to want to select the person's account that we're trying to sync to. So in this case, I selected community team. If I had an agent, I'd want to make sure to select the agent's name. Here, I can search for that particular contact that I want to add on there. So I'm just going to type in Hannah. Once I've found who I want to select with, I can select add. And the next thing I'm going to want to do is set that role. If I don't set a role, and I just head over into Follow-Up Boss. Let me see if I can get my FUB open. And I just go over to people and I click on Hannah. If we don't have that set up, it won't show up in this list. I believe that I added them on previously, so that might be where they're showing up. But sometimes this will say like, you need to log in or this needs to be logged in before we can actually access the information. So we'll want to set the role. The role that I have, the two roles that I have currently are Follow-Up Boss Agent and Limited Follow-Up Boss Agent. I'm going to click on Manage Roles really quickly and talk about these roles very quickly. So we've got Follow-Up Boss Agent. That one has permission to everything, the timeline details, contacts, the information that they have underneath them, documents, has access to the tasks in the notes. The Limited Follow-Up Boss has limited access. So they don't have access to the contacts. They do see documents. They do see tasks that were completed. They do see the details in the timeline. So you can create specific roles where, maybe you're working with an agent who hired you as a TC service to take care of their system. And so you don't want to give them access to everything, or maybe you don't even want to give them access to see what tasks have been completed. They just need to be able to see the documents and download them if they need to download them, or, check out the details, or check out, the timeline for it, right? If that's the case, then, you can set up a limited access view. And then when I add that on, so I'm going to add that on to Hannah, and then I'm going to refresh my people, select back onto Hannah. Once this loads, we'll go ahead and click that Ivy Lane. Now we can see, we only see the timeline, the details. So that's any details they've shared. And then we can also see the documents, and they can upload and download the documents if they need to. Okay. Now with the details, right? We're talking about the fields that are on that property. What pulls over? What shows on this, Hannah? When we're looking in our open to close account, if you ever need to check, okay, what details are going to be shared with my agents, you're going to want to click on where it says editor on that property. If you'd like to, you can also navigate to it by going to our hammer icon and clicking on field editor. When you get into your field editor, anything with a purple star can be shared into that particular profile. So for example, here, client doesn't have a purple star selected. If I head over to Hannah and I click on details and I go to critical deadlines, I believe that's critical details. There we go. It doesn't show that particular field for me. On that particular property, it only shows me the fields that have values in them on here. Okay. Or ones that are selected and says that we specifically need to share that particular field. Cool. Alrighty. Any questions? Awesome. All right, we'll go to the next one. Fields. Okay, cool. So we've got a question on how to update fields. Now, how to update your fields, this might be dependent on your permission set. So I'm going to really quickly talk about that. If you're a team member and you're on a big team, and you're one of the users on this organization, you might have specific permissions set up for you based off of what the owner of that account has set up for you. If you are the owner, so for example, I'm the owner of this particular account, I don't have a trash can next to my login. I am the person who created this account. Everyone below that are people that I've invited to my account. If you're the owner, you're not going to be able to restrict your own permissions. But if you invited, let's say, implementation team, I invited them and I need to restrict their permissions, you're going to want to go to the organization and users, click on permissions, and then here you can see the set of permissions that are currently available. If I go up to where it says navigation here, and I unselect some of these options here, these options are not going to be available for that particular user. I can say that I want them to have access to all of the templates and all of the settings, or I can say that I want them to have access to none of them. When we're talking about restricting field view, you just have to unselect fields. And then when we log in as that particular user, they're not going to be able to access the fields. So first things first, if you guys are trying to edit fields and you can't figure out how to do that, if you're a team member, I would probably check in with your admin or whoever owns the account. Hey, do I have access to edit fields first? Because if you don't have access, you don't have permission to do that. Now, if you do have access, we're going to head to our hammer icon into our field editor. We can also access our fields from our properties themselves by selecting the property and selecting editor. It's going to take us to our field editor. Once we're on that field editor, here are all of our fields. Up at the top, we have our field groups. That's going to be transaction details, in my case, listing details, commission details, intake questions, and archive field sections. Okay, so these are all my archive field sections. Now at the top, we're going to have that transaction details. That's my field group. This critical details, address, earnest money details, those are going to be my field sections. And then within them are my fields. So to edit the field, I'm going to click on client. If I need to edit the way that this looks, where it says field label, that's what I would be updating. Where it says merge field, that's also what I'd be updating. So let's say I'm going to update this to say agents on team. Okay, so I'm just making up something, agents on team. When I update that field label, a best practice is to update the merge field as well. We want to make sure that that field label and that merge field match. That way, if you're using it in any email templates, you're not like, wait a second, this says client, but I'm not sure which field they're referring to. As long as you make sure that your field label and your merge field match, you're going to be able to really quickly figure out which field you're referring to and which field needs to get filled out. If you don't know, then you're going to have a bit more of a difficult time trying to figure out which field is it that I need to update so that the values pull onto this template correctly. Once we've updated the field label and the merge field, we're going to scroll down to the bottom, click on I understand and update. It's going to update the name of that particular field for all of your transactions. So if I go into Golden Oaks, it now says agents on team. If I go to Ivy Lane, it says agents on team. Okay. So the moment we update it, it's updated. Going back over to our field editor, we can also edit the other options on here. So here I've got other team members' names as well. Maybe I need to add another team member. I'm going to add Emily and we'll add Jana. So I've added all my team members. Now that I've added them on here, it looks like I have some color coordination for these other team members. I might want to add that on there. So we'll make Emily green and we're going to make Jana. What color am I not using yet? Red. There we go. So now we've got everyone with their set colors. That means that when I select those particular team members on that property, that color is going to be what their name is highlighted in. So going back over to our property, clicking on the drop down here and selecting Jana, you can see here that when I select it, you can see those colors highlighted. Once we give it that check mark, it'll say Jana and it'll be highlighted red. Now, for these color coordinations on the back end, this is going to be what's available on the Pro and the Scale plan, okay? So if you're on the Grow plan and you're like, Hannah, I don't have the option to set up a color like that, that's because that's available on the next plan up. There are some features that that are only available on like the Pro plan and Scale plan versus being available on the Grow plan as well. This is one of those. You can technically set up the colors on the Pro plan, or on the Grow plan on the property itself. So color coordination is something that's not necessarily limited. It's just having it set up as like a template in the back end. That is something that's only available on the Pro plan. When we're talking about the other fields that we can update, we've got a number of other different types of fields. So I'm just going to select add field and go through those. We have a text field, a text area, a decimal, which can be good for percentages or currency. We've got a date, a number, and a choice field. So the field that we were just looking at, this is a choice field. Once that field's been created, we cannot change its field type. So just keep that in mind. If you're like, wait, Hannah, I wanted agents on team to be like a text area. Well, we're going to want to update that name because we can't use it a second time around, right? It's sort of like one-to-one type of thing. So here I'm going to go ahead and just update that to client again. And I'm going to update this to client again. Say I understand an update. And now if we wanted to add on another field, we would want to select what field type it was. And then here we can enter in that agents on team if we wanted to. We could also say it's a text area if it's going to be multiple people that we're kind of putting into that merge field. Cool. The other fields that I have currently on here, like I said, earnest money amount, that's a decimal. We've got some dates on here. If I continue to scroll down, we'll have some days field as well. So the way the days field works is those days field work with the date template. So for example, our inspection period date on some of your guys's contracts, you may have it say something like, well, the inspection needs to be scheduled within 17 days of contract acceptance, right? Well, we don't want you guys to have to do that manual work of trying to figure out, okay, well, what's 17 days from the first with business days and skipping federal holidays, or calendar days and skipping federal holidays, or counting federal holidays, whatever that looks like, right? To prevent that, what we do is we have this days field here so that your agents or your TCs or yourself can enter in what number of days that is. You can also have it that it's preset on the back end that, well, it's always 17, Hannah, it doesn't change. So then we can have it set that, well, 17 days after contract acceptance, that's when that home inspection period is due, or that inspection period is due. I'll show you guys what that looks like in just a moment. Let me see if there's any other fields that I kind of wanted to touch on. It's really the main ones, because the rest of these, they're dates. They're pretty straightforward. Cool. Yeah. Let's go ahead and take a look at our date template. Keep in mind, whenever you're making updates to any of your fields, you're technically making that for your entire database. So just keep that in mind when you're going through. If you realize you need fields or you need to alter fields, I usually suggest archiving your fields before deleting. That way you can make sure, just in case, if you need to bring it back, you can. Now, talking about the date templates, I'm going to go to our hammer icon underneath templates, and then we're going to go to date templates. Once you're on date templates, I'm just going to click this contract to close one. And here we can see a couple examples. I'm going to click on that inspection period date. So the way that this one currently works is that our TCs or our agents are going to be prompted to enter in the number of days field, right? So they're going to have to put in a value so it can calculate it as calendar days after execution date, which is my contract acceptance date. That's when this inspection period is due. I can also say in California, usually it's 17. I can say, well, 17 days. So now I've updated that. And now it's going to either be 17 calendar days after execution date. That's when this particular date's due. Or if, let's say, I receive an addendum that's altered it. Oh, actually, they got an extension. It's going to be 21 days now. I can update that 17 on the property to 21 by using this inspection period days field. So taking a look at it on the property itself, we're going to go down to that date and see if I have one. So here's an appraisal due days field I have right here. It says 15. If I update this 15 to 20, it's going to update that particular appraisal due date to the 2nd of October. It's the same thing with any of these ones. So here again, inspection period, it says 20. This one says on the 2nd. Let me update that. It's actually 25. And now it's going to update that to the 7th. So that's kind of how that day template works. When you receive that addendum, or you need to update the due date for it, you can update it and it's going to update that other field for you, as long as that day template's been applied. Cool. Alrighty. Any questions? Cool. So I'll just go to the next one. Looks like we have a question on Dotloop. No loop showing if admin access for Dotloop. They need to connect the other profiles in OTC. Okay, cool. So for Dotloop, it's number one, first step, we're going to want to make sure that underneath apps and API, so down to that gear icon, apps and API, we're going to want to make sure that our Dotloop integration is connected. Here, this one's pretty straightforward. When we connect it, it just says login and it connects it, thankfully. So here I have mine connected. Now, the one that you want connected underneath your account, similar to how we have our follow-up boss one, is going to be your admin account, right? If you're logged in underneath another user, I believe you can log in the same admin account. You might need to log in that individual user. It just depends. Same thing with when we're talking about our organization and users. Same thing with that follow-up boss API access. We'll also want to have our agents share their API credentials underneath their agent profile. That way, if we need to pull in specific information for that agent directly from their API, we have that option here. So as long as they add in their credentials here, Dotloop credentials here, then we should be able to access them. Now, when it comes to bringing in those properties into open to close, we can either select add property. We can go to the new plus sign up here at the top and click on import from Dotloop. Once we've selected that, it's going to show us which profiles are currently connected. So like I said, I only have one currently connected to my admin account. If I needed to log into anyone else's, I would want to make sure that theirs is already set up. So either on their agent profile it's set up, or make sure I'm logged into the correct account so I can see which API I'm trying to play with. Here, once I select that particular profile, it's going to allow me to, it's going to show me the loops that I have. I can say I want to see the newest created. I want to see the A through Z, it just kind of depends. Currently, Dotloop doesn't give us the ability to search for the particular address. So you do need to manually go through, sort that. I would usually say do it by newest first if you're trying to import the most recent loop that you added in there. Or you can go through the pages. I don't have very many pages on this particular one. So that's the reason why it doesn't show that there. If you ever get yourself into a situation like I just did, where I said next and there are no loops for this profile and we're just sitting there and you're like, well, I selected it, why isn't it showing up? Just click on resync profiles. You can also click on refresh. And what that's going to do is just going to refresh the page, take you back to where you were looking before. Cool. Now within Dotloop, you'll also want to make sure that they have admin access, right? So following our documentation to make that connection to Dotloop is going to be your best bet to making sure that everything is set up correctly. What I suggest is you can go to our little person icon, click on Support Center. Here you can type in Dotloop. Once we've typed in Dotloop, you can either click on any one of these if you want to. Import Dotloop, we can click on Dotloop, and then here we've got that Dotloop, those list of articles specifically for Dotloop. I can click on Authorize OTC to access your Dotloop account, and this will go through and kind of give you the steps and say that you know, what you need to do to get that authorized. Cool. Alrighty. So the next one is free trials on transactions. It might not apply to most of you guys, but if you are on the free trial and you're entering in transactions, a couple things to note. Number one, when you're going through and you're adding in, what counts as a free trial? If you select new property, we enter in the address here. You select your team. You select your agent. You can select your agent, or you don't have to select your agent. And you select on next. That's a property. So usually what I say is if you select next, go ahead and fill out all the information, create that property. If you're just reviewing to see, okay, which property templates show up, then don't select next, select cancel, and that's going to cancel. It's not going to count as a property. But the moment you press that next button, that's a property, okay? That counts towards your trial. Even if you don't end up using it, even if you end up pressing cancel and you don't have a record of it, If you press next, it counts as a trial. If you import any of these and you select import, right? So here we can choose which property. Once again, we can like review the information. We can add stuff. We can choose our team member. We can choose our user. The moment that we say import loop, that counts as a property. Okay. So keep that in mind. Even if you don't fill out most of these values, even if you skip over the document or the property templates or the settings, if you click on import loop, that loop has been imported. That counts as a transaction. Same thing with the other options here. Sky slope. If you press import sky slope, it's going to count. Same thing with brokerment. If you select that option for brokerment and you say import, it's going to count, right? Now, when it comes to our intake form, it's a little different, right? Because you might need to do some testing. You might need to check out some information, make sure things are populating correctly. I'm going to go ahead and click on new listing under contract. When I go to fill out this one, I can fill out this details. I can add on my address. I can check out my conditional statements, right? I can say yard, yes, select some options here, check out my, to make sure that my form conditions are looking good. As I'm going through this, if I get down to the bottom and I say save and continue, that counts as a property. So if you say save and continue, but you don't actually submit the intake form, it's already counted as a property because you said that save and continue. That's when it creates that record. Okay. So just keep that in mind when you're going through and you're doing testing. If you want to keep yourself on the trial, do not select save and continue. If you just need to test out your form conditions, once you're done testing here, we're going to scroll to the bottom and select cancel form. And then that way you're not using that free trial, but you were able to check out and see, okay, did that form condition bring on the other fields that I need to fill out on that intake form? I usually suggest when you guys are on trial, try to use at least, if you create that first initial transaction by selecting, that new property, right? When you initially create, we say, start your first transaction, create your first transaction, just so you can have the values on there. If you do go through with that, I suggest keeping that property. Any one of the properties that you create within your system can be reused. Okay. So I can go onto this property here. I can update the name for it if I want to update the name for it. I can go through and delete all the fields or add in more fields. I can go through and delete all the task templates, add on different task templates. I can add on different triggers if I need to, different documents. I can send out, add on different contacts. I can reuse the same property. Right? If it's a test property, I can use that same property to test and view my test templates, document templates, check out my emails, whatever I need to. I can still reuse it, even if it has a different value or a different address than what I originally wanted it to be. Okay. So just keep that in mind. Don't delete them, use them. Might as well, right? They're there. The only difference is, obviously filling out that initial stages, right? If you're selecting intake form, you're filling out the values there. If you're reusing one, you're filling out the values in the fields. Cool. Alrighty. That was really it. That was the only, FAQs that we had for this week. If there are any questions, please drop them into the Q&A. Otherwise, we are, 30 minutes in, haven't had any questions just yet. If we don't have any questions in the next 2, 3, maybe 5 minutes, I'll give you guys 5 minutes. We'll go ahead and end for today. I hope that you guys had a wonderful weekend. And hopefully we do get a couple more questions in here, live ones from you guys if you have any. Other than that, I'm just going to go ahead and sit on our open to close website. We'll just sit here for a moment. Cool. Looks like we got a question. Questions for ones with an already active loop. How do we connect it to a current transaction or merge it? Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my Ivy lane here. If you already have it where there's a loop already in Dotloop, how do we connect it to one and open to close? We're going to click on that more tab here. We're going to locate that particular API. So here's Dotloop. Here it looks like this one's connected. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect it. You can either click on link property to search and link that property. So I'm going to select my default profile. It's going to pull in my loops. Here's my Ivy lane. I can select assign, and now they've been connected. The other option is if you need to push it over into Dotloop, let's say you looked for it on that list, you don't see it, or you need to add it in there, you can click on export property and you can push this property over to Dotloop. I'm going to go ahead and reconnect it. And we can look at kind of like what happens after you reconnect it. So once we've connected it, we can import details, import documents, import contacts, or we can open it up into Dotloop. When we click on import contacts, it's going to bring up our contacts, and this is where we're bringing them in from Dotloop into open to close. If we need to push contacts from open to close into Dotloop, we're going to want to go to the contacts tab. Once we go to it, we can click on, expand contact details. Then here we've got that add to Dotloop. One caveat with adding it to Dotloop is we're going to want to add in that city, state, zip, and country. So usually what I suggest when you guys are going through and you're editing your contacts, make sure you already have those values in there. So if I go over to this particular contact, let's click on Jill. Here's Jill. We're going to want to make sure we have her city. So I'm just going to go ahead and enter in Boise because that's the one I have right there. It's added in her address already. Once I say update, if we try to push it over to Dotloop, those values are going to automatically pull in. So just kind of like a little hint, what do they call it? Fun fact about that Dotloop integration. The other option that we have is to import documents from Dotloop as well. So we're going to go to documents, click on Dotloop documents. Here it's going to show all the documents that are currently added onto that Dotloop. If we wanted to bring them all over, we're just going to want to select what folder we want to put it in. We can also select the placeholder if we want to. So let me just see really quickly which one would be a good one. Let's do home protection plan invoice. So I'm going to click on Dotloop. I'm going to click on our new folder. I'm going to type in home protection. I'm going to click on the file itself. So not the folder. If I wanted to, I could add it to the folder. I'm going to click on the file and say import. And what that's going to do is it's going to put it directly into that placeholder. So now if I scroll down, here's that particular home protection plan invoice. I can say that it's fully executed. I can click on that paper clip, and here's that that contract, or here's that invoice that we needed. Obviously, this is not an invoice. This is a contract, but that's what it looks like to bring it over, pop it into a placeholder. You can also split that particular document once you've imported it. So you can see this one's 82 pages. We can click on split and we can split it up if we want to, and like either, push things over or do what we need to do with this particular document. Cool. Let me know if there are any other follow-up questions. Yeah, of course. Of course. Those are kind of like the main things with like that Dotloop integration that I see a lot of people using. Sweet. All right. Well, like I said, we'll just go back to relaxing at least for another 2 minutes. And if we do not get any questions, we'll go ahead and end today's call today. I appreciate the questions that we did get. Hopefully the FAQs were something helpful for you guys. You know what? I can actually check the change log and see if we've had any updates. I know that it's we had kind of that holiday weekend, so I'm not sure if there's anything really updated or pushed out that's new. Not really. Not any new things. I know that we had one feature that was asked for a lot in our idea lab, and that was to send out custom messages to our users when we send them an invite to open and close. We did add that in there. I don't know if we had covered it on a previous call or not, but I do want to highlight it for you guys just in case anyone's rewatching this training. If you guys are inviting new users, whether it's a team member or an agent portal user, you can add in your own custom message. I like it because, you might need to share a Loom video. You can copy paste that Loom link in here to show them, what are the next steps after the agent creates their portal, or you might have some instructions for that team member, or you might want to say, welcome team member. We look forward to working with you and we're excited to have you on our team. This is just like so that you can add more to that email than just, hi, you've been invited to open and close, right? So it's just allow you to make a custom email in there. We do go through that idea lab. We do go through and figure out which ones are high priority, and we kind of level them out based off of how you guys are voting on them. So keep that in mind. Definitely if you have an idea, okay, and you're like, okay, I would love for this to be implemented and open to close. I usually suggest look through the ideas that we have currently. So either search the ideas or scroll through the ideas that we currently have. The ones that are most highly rated are the ones that we're going to be looking at first. So if someone already has an idea similar to yours, it's probably best that you just vote on that one versus, the other way around where you're like, I'm going to create a new idea. The other thing that we've been working on with this is if any ideas have been completed. Here you can see this one was completed. That's the one I just talked about. We do see them here. We can also see what ideas you guys might have. You can also submit a new idea. I believe once we select this idea, okay, cool. So this is just that one. I thought maybe there was a comment for it, but there might not be. If you guys see an idea that you're like, oh my God, I love this, and I want to add to it, there's more to it that I want to add. Definitely feel free to chat with us. Send us a message, say, hey, I saw this idea in the Idea Lab. I wanted to expand on it. This is the example of how I would use this and more, if there was more that you would use with it. I usually suggest sending us a Loom video is really helpful because then we can share that with our leadership team, our development team. They take a look at it. They're like, oh my gosh, yes, I can see why someone would want this. And then, it kind of escalates that even further, that process of getting that feature in there. So just some thoughts with that. Cool. Looks like we don't have any other questions. I will give you guys back the 20 minutes of your day. Again, I'll wait like a minute. If we don't have anything else, I'll go ahead and end today's call. Thank you guys for joining us. As always, if you need to reach out to us, you can reach out to us at help@open2close. You can chat with us directly here. You can also join any of our webinars by going to the webinars tab on our Learn area. Today, we just wrapped up our Wednesday workshop. Next week, we're doing intake forms and property templates. And then the following week, or the following Wednesday, we're doing using open to close. Awesome. Alrighty, guys. Well, have a wonderful rest of your day. It is November, so happy November. And I will see you guys next week.